I'm going to start off the session by turning my attention to Waled. The National Energy Services Company is fairly new. You were established last year by the Saudi Public Investment Fund with a capital of 1.9 Saudi riyals, which is $500 million. Saudi Arabia is a fairly recent entrant to both the renewables industry as well as the energy efficiency industry. So I would just like to understand, what is the scale of work that needs to be done in the kingdom?
Well, thank you so much. Actually, it's a privilege to be here among this panel and among the different participants. So us and the National Energy Service Company are also called as Tariffs. We're focusing on retrofitting the public buildings and public facilities as well. So the large scale we have, talking about 260,000 buildings, in addition to 2 million street lights as well. So the task we have at hand is huge. And the company is set up basically as a super ESCO, so similar to Etihad ESCO, our counterparts here in Dubai. And our scope is really on managing, also developing projects, in addition to finance. So we have, as you mentioned, the capital from PIF, and basically we have access to further capital when needed.
Also, could you take me through Saudi Arabia's long-term goals in terms of energy efficiency savings?
Definitely. So basically there's a whole center basically with a mandate of focusing on energy efficiency. So we have the Saudi Energy Efficiency Center. Underneath it there's the Saudi Energy Efficiency Program. And that program holds together more than 130 basically individuals, 25 entities. And the focus of that center and the program is to address energy efficiency in buildings, transportation and industry, both for existing and new stocks. So basically, there are many initiatives coming through, and hopefully we'll hear more announcements as we speak.
And Afra, you have a very interesting job title. You're the Chief Efficienology Officer, which is a job title I'm assuming very few have. Could you tell me what sort of mandate you have with this exciting title within SEWA?
As an Efficienology Officer, it's one member of the Mars team in SEWA. So it came by a fun story that the chairman of SEWA was an interview, and he has been asked if he is ready to go to Mars. And then he said, yes, I'm ready, and I have 25 people to be sent to Mars and to build SEWA there. So I'm responsible for the efficiency plus technology together. But we have other creative name like Imagineering Officer and other one.
Dr. Rashid is certainly a visionary. Yes. He's got a lot of ideas for Sharjah, and he's got a lot of ideas in terms of optimizing energy usage. But also you are launching your ESCO scheme targeting around 100 industrial companies this year, or has it been launched? If you could just share some insight.
In line with the vision of letting Sharjah be the city of conservation, which is one of the initiatives that's been launched by His Highness Sheikh Sultan Al Qasimi, along with the previous initiative. We launched the ESCO scheme recently, and we started to register the ESCO within SEWA. It's different registration form than the other emirates. And the first phase of the focused group in this project is on the highest consumer in Sharjah, which are the top 100. Most of them are industrial, but there is a third of them which is government, and the other third is commercial.
And we move on to Arif, who is the executive director of Tecate, which is part of Etihad ESCO, who took the lead in the sort of energy efficiency drive here in this region. Etihad ESCO is a wholly owned subsidiary of DEWA, established, I think, nearly 5 years ago. If you could just give me an idea of the sort of market that existed then and the sort of journey you have been on.
Yeah, sure. Sweet to hear my voice. Thank you so much for inviting me to this lovely panel. I'm very happy to meet with Waled the first time, Dr. And of course, Andrea. Me and Andrea worked together before, so it's really interesting to be part of this really interesting panel. And Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week. So Etihad was established in 2013. I think Pradeep spoke about it a bit earlier. And then it was in the structuring phase in 2013 and 14. At that point in time, the retrofit market of the existing building stock was basically quite an infant. Nobody knew about it. The structure in there was just being set up, so it wasn't really driven. But the real work that we started doing was in 2015. Etihad started doing the first set of government buildings in 2015. And if I remember correctly, the savings that we attained from a retrofit at that point, electricity was around 10 gigawatt hours back in 2015. Then in 2016, we started doing more retrofits. And I think around the end of 2016, we were able to retrofit close to 2,000 buildings from the day we started. The savings that we've seen in 2016 went up 8-fold to around 100 gigawatt hours, which is ahead of the targets that were set to the retrofit program as part of the demand side management strategy. And I think going on this path with the government directives, with the support from the different government entities, and with the draw from the private sector, and I think you've met a few of the ESCOs in here, we're looking at doubling the savings on an annual basis, up to a point that we should reach around 1.7 terawatt hours of saving per annum in 2030. So, yeah, I think it's a pretty challenging but very interesting trip ahead.
So Dubai has set very specific targets, as you just mentioned, 1.7 terawatt hours by 2030, but also water savings, I believe, of 5.6 billion
yes,
imperial gallons by
too.
2030, and also on top of that, carbon dioxide reductions by 1 million tons by 2030. Where are we at in terms of achieving these goals?
So probably the big picture goal is for the retrofit program, we call it program number 2 in DSM terms, is to retrofit 30,000 buildings by 2030. So far, based on the data that we have, and we have announced publicly, we have around 2,200 buildings that have been retrofitted so far. I think pretty much we are on target. The key thing behind Etihad when it was set up was to make sure that we develop a market for ESCOs, a market where ESCOs can come in from all over the world and do the retrofit work that we need them to do over here. And that was one of the key objectives that Etihad was set up based on the Dubai Supreme Council of Energy mandate. And so far they have done exactly that. In addition to this, they've been able to create, we've been able to create as part of our creative business model, the funding mechanism to make sure that all the entities, large private, commercial, industrial entities are able to tap into it at zero down. And I can talk about it more if you would like to in a bit.
Sure, and I'll also follow up on how you measure these targets and these energy savings a bit later. And also I'll come to you, Afra, because you have some very ambitious targets in Sharjah as well. But I'd like to go to you, Andrea. What are Ras Al Khaimah's goals in terms of both renewable energy deployment as well as energy efficiency? I believe you're just fine-tuning these strategies at the moment.
Absolutely, yes. We have recently started our assessment of the opportunities, and we are in the middle of a strategy exercise. Ras Al Khaimah is undergoing a phase of development. There are different segments of the economy which are showing significant vitality. The tourism sector, the hospitality, the industrial sector is historically strong in Ras Al Khaimah. And real estate is also undergoing significant development with changes in the building stocks that are visible day by day. Now, in this context, energy efficiency, renewable energy, these topics, sustainability in general, is seen as a driver for attraction of investment and capital and people in the end, and capabilities. And so under this mandate, we are this scenario, we are working on a strategy and assessing the targets for the long run. We are thinking about levels of ambitions that are similar to those that have been shown in other Emirates. Regarding the programs, we have already agreed on a series of programs. We are working on, in particular, on green building regulations that should be coming soon. The retrofit program, in particular, is going to be clearly an important program for Ras Al Khaimah.
And what about timelines? Can you share with us some ideas of the timelines that you are targeting?
Of course. Now we are working on structuring the program. We have issued an accreditation scheme for the ESCOs. The accreditation is in progress. We have defined program standards, the standard contracts that will be applied. And this year we plan to launch pilot projects. We have a couple of pilot projects that we will launch directly this year with a guaranteed savings model. We plan over the next 3 to 5 years to cover the government, and then gradually extend to the private sector. Fortunately, Ras Al Khaimah is a place where there is a smooth transition between the government and the private sector, where there is in the middle some semi-government, which is also more easily addressable than the private sector. So we will go along this path of the next 5 to 10 years. First the government, and then gradually extending to the private sector.
And also in terms of scope, how many buildings are we talking about, or could you give us an idea?
Well, the total number of buildings of Ras Al Khaimah is very, very large. And the reason is that there is a high share of locals in Ras Al Khaimah. The local population comprises a good percentage, higher than other Emirates, and they used to live in villas. So individual buildings, the number of buildings is high, and comparable, I would say, also to the number of buildings that is in Dubai, in orders of magnitude. Of course, Dubai is much larger, but in orders of magnitude, they are comparable. We count over 150,000 buildings in Ras Al Khaimah, but most of them are very small. No? I would say the addressable number of buildings perhaps is in the range of 1,000 for these kind of programs.
Coming back to Waled, the numbers we hear from Saudi Arabia these days are really ambitious. Only the day before, we had the chief of the renewables scheme, Turki Al-Shahri, who was on this very stage, and he spoke about I think almost a doubling of the existing targets, 4 gigawatts by 2023, all to be tendered this year. Now, moving on to the efficiency side of things, I just would like to know, what is the estimated value of projects that we are looking at, likely to be tendered perhaps this year?
Okay. So basically, it all depends on the type of projects we're addressing, of course, this year. So we have a combination and a portfolio of projects that range from street lights to large buildings, talking about 30,000 square meter and higher, and smaller, basically, types of buildings as well, like mosques and schools. And we're doing different pilot programs here and there to understand the capability of the market. Are they willing to kind of take the risk and move into these complex buildings? So we estimate that, all in taken into consideration, that the estimated, let's say, expected savings this year will be around up to 40 gigawatt hour. So, yeah.
That's a very ambitious target. And also, Afra would like to share with us some interesting targets they have. You're targeting 30% energy efficiency by 2030, you said?
By 2020.
2020.
Yes, it's very aggressive and very strong, but it needs a lot of effort. And we're doing a lot of effort and a lot of initiative. And one of the big initiatives that we're working on is the peak hour. This initiative being launched by His Highness Sheikh Sultan Al Qasimi. It's representative the highest hour of consumption through the year. It's in 1st of July annually from 2:30 to 3:30. Regardless that we have a big achievement that we have done last year as a retrofit initiative. We targeted the mosque in Sharjah, most of the mosque in Sharjah, and this project were being funded by SEWA. And the result was that we saved 25% in the electricity side, and we saved 50 million gallon annually in the water.
Okay. Moving on to Arif, just would like to get an idea of the players, the number of players you have in the market at the moment. And also if you could just talk us through the accreditation program you have currently. It's fairly stringent, I believe, in Dubai. If you could just tell me.
Sure. The very first thing that was done when they decided to start off with the retrofit program was to make sure that we bring in, as we develop this market, we bring in the right players, which means we need to make sure that whoever comes into this field have to have the right skill set. The accreditation scheme was developed by the Regulatory and Supervisory Bureau of Dubai. Today has around 21 accredited ESCOs and around 13 energy auditors, accredited energy auditors. And the requirements were both either provisional or completely accredited. And it includes, well, obviously the CEM requirements, CMVP, the CEA requirements within them, and of course some financial requirements to make sure that this entity is able to stand behind the project that it does. If you look at the projects that we are launching in Dubai, they're mostly guaranteed savings. Around 60% of the projects that are being launched in Dubai right now are guaranteed savings. All the projects that are being launched by Etihad ESCO are guaranteed savings energy performance contracts, which means the ESCO is expected to attain savings targets around 30, 40%, 25%, depending on every contract and depending on the building, to make sure that they attain them. In case the ESCO cannot attain them, then they have to pay that difference. And hence, the financial soundness of the ESCO is very important for them to be able to compete in such a market under these requirements. Of course, you can find much more information on the RSB website than I just said right here.
Going to come back to Waled. You mentioned 40 gigawatt hour, and this is achievable target by
this year, basically.
By this year.
So we're talking about, maybe let me elaborate a bit on this. So basically, we just started in the last 6-7 months, and we already have 10 RFPs in the pipeline. So, and here we're talking about a combination of buildings, very visible buildings. So we have put the criteria together for that. So we looked at simplicity, visibility, and complexity at the same time to put together the list of projects that will attract not only the ESCOs, but also have the clients, which is the government entities, to kind of adopt, these projects. So, and also we launched the streetlight, our first streetlight project. Talk about 33,000 lamps for this year. And also we're following up with more to come as well.
So what sort of investment would be required to see all of this through?
So at this point, we're working together with the Public Investment Fund to assess in terms of the cost that will take and how much we can basically take it from our own equity versus go to the market with some credit and some investment opportunities. So we're going to be setting up some SPVs for private equity investors. I mean, let's talk about a bit of the expected returns on some of these projects, which range between the 10 to 12%. With some leverage, it becomes very attractive. So, and we will be announcing soon in terms of the size, in terms of capital for these projects. Definitely.
And have you also fine-tuned your criteria for ESCO accreditation in Saudi? Has that been announced already?
Yes. So basically, the criteria we have is similar to the criteria that Arif also mentioned here in Dubai. So it's quite international in terms of two types of licensing, full and provisional. And we're looking at three different, basically, dimensions. So technical capabilities and operation capabilities, the staff and the ability for the people to deliver, and the financial soundness. As mentioned before, you're locking yourself in a 10-year, almost 15-year contracts with these entities. So we want to make sure that in case of there's any shortfall of savings, we'll be able to deliver.
And you're open to foreign investment in this, or are you targeting local
Yes,
players?
actually, we have a combination of both. So we have almost 3 to 4 entities, just Saudi entities that already started the accreditation process, and the usual, let's say, companies from which are global players that already have signed up in Dubai, have signed up also for the scheme in Saudi Arabia. So there's a national committee that oversees this basically scheme. We have the Ministry of Commerce represented there. We have the Saudi Energy Efficiency Center represented there. And there's more information that could be found on their website, asco.seek.gov.sa, with all the requirements and all what you need to know about the scheme itself.
And also, Afra, if you could just talk me through the industrial program you had. You said you have a focused group?
which is the top 100 consumer.
Okay.
SEWA.
Okay, and if you can give me an idea of the sort of industry that you're targeting in SEWA, that you're in discussions with.
Okay, so as I said, most of the top 100 consumer are industrial, and what made us very amazed about the industrial, that they don't mind to invest into energy efficiency, but they are really care about bringing the best ISCO all over the world. So they want the best solution with the best offer. So as SEWA, we are trying to help those consumers to get the best offer. Not only that, because we started with the private sector, we found that the government entity, when they hear that we started to visit the private, they called us and they send us letters to ask for a help to reduce the consumption. They don't pay by themselves as individual their bill. There is the financial department in Sharjah, they are responsible for paying. Regardless that, they started to care about their consumption. And so they started to call SEWA to do the retrofit and to help them to reduce the consumption and find out the best ISCO. And the good news is that we found that some companies or some entity, they met a lot of ISCO, but they don't know if this is the best one or not. And we are very happy that the whole society started to be aware about their energy and their consumption. And because of the price increases and all of those things, everyone start to take care, even if they don't pay. They feel that this is like a CSR responsibility and those things. So we are happy to reach a target that the culture will be split all over the society, because what SEWA do is not creating a business, but it's creating the culture. Just to do an introduction, explain the whole concept for our consumer, and then if they want to SEWA to help them, or they want to go directly, it will reach us to the same target. We need to save. It's the same thing with all the Emirates. Regardless the model, regardless the scheme, we have one target, is to save energy. And the benefits is mutual between the client to let him be happy, to reduce his consumption, and to save the network as a utility for the new project or for the demand.
It's a very interesting point you made about educating the market. Arif, how was it when Etihad ESCO started? How was it to educate the market? And what has been your learning experience so far?
I can speak about it from both being Taqat and Etihad. I think it's been, the very, very beginning, awareness was one of the key challenges that we had. Actually, we identified 4 of them. The very first was change management, whereas bringing the entities, the government entities that we're working with, to jump on board and believe in what we're trying to do, simply because what we're asking them to do is completely outside their core business. So we really need to be creative in there, just to make sure that we don't swerve their attention from their everyday business, nor ask them to spend from their pockets on things that they don't really understand or at that point in time cared about. and that's how we came up with the creative funding mechanism. The second part was awareness. And we found out that not just on a public level, but also on a government as well as on a private commercial and industrial sector level, they just don't understand what energy makeover or energy retrofits are. And that was completely understood. So there was a lot of work that was done by the teams, both in Etihad as well as the private sector, the ESCOs that work. And if you ask the ESCOs now, they tell you the very first thing, they tell you trying to make the customer understand what our work is and how it can save them electricity and water. Yeah. That was very, very challenging. But then once you get over this gate, there is another much more important gate, which is inherent in the industry itself. You're getting into something called energy performance contracting, which means whatever you save has to be somehow measured. And then since you have a guaranteed savings agreement, the only way that an ESCO is able to be paid is that they are attaining their targets on a guaranteed savings agreement contract. If it's a shared savings agreement, the only way they get paid if they're attaining those savings because they're sharing them with the end user. And such savings are being measured through protocols, international protocols. So you need to be able to go back to the customer to explain to them if 1 year their actual consumption went up and didn't go down, that it went up because they changed the way they do business. And that's what we call the baseline, adjusted baseline. So you need to go back to them and explain to them there is something called baseline, adjusted baseline, and the savings that we have to be adjusted accordingly. And then, you know, the shared savings agreement or the guaranteed savings agreement has to take that into consideration. And that's what we call measurement and verification plan. So that educational route has been extremely challenging at the beginning. And now Etihad does it, all the ESCOs do it, and Tecate, part of our core business, is developing awareness in the public as well as the commercial and industrial customer and the governments. And we do it through workshops, networking meetings, we're developing guidebooks, we have web portals, websites that do that, videos. We try to do this. It's not easy, but we're getting there.
Also in 2014, that's when budgets were tight. How did you convince people to make that initial adjustment or investment? You know, when it's for many of them, it's a leap of faith.
I'll tell you what, to create a market, government had to jump in and stimulate it. Etihad was created to make sure that this market is developed, but then to stimulate that interest, there was a directive that came out, which is in 2015, not in 2014. It's called Directive 1 of 2015, which was introduced by the Dubai Supreme Council of Energy, and it was signed by the chairman of DSCE, His Highness Sheikh Ahmed bin Saeed Al Maktoum. At that point, what it did, it requested from every government entity, 61 entities, to conduct an energy audit and then develop a retrofit plan accordingly. Just to conduct an energy audit, it would give you, as a government entity, clear picture of what your business case is, if there is one. And if there is a business case, the next part is Etihad Energy Services, through their relationship with Sukuk National Bonds, came in with a big fund to say, we'll do the work at zero down, and the way you pay back in our creative business model is through your DO bill from your savings. So these entities did not have to pay a penny, not up front and not even through the project, because of the guaranteed savings agreement and the government backing at that point. So really it was a no-brainer.
Waled, now you have a task of educating a market and also developing the market. How are you preparing yourself for it? And what has been the feedback you've had from your engagements with public entities and buildings that you're looking to work with?
Well, that's a great question, actually. So in 2014, we started off by just assessing the situation on the ground. So we had a workshop talking to all the ESCOs and potential ESCOs. And we understand that it's such a nascent market at that point. So 2014, nobody was talking about energy efficiency. And we put together a list of barriers and issues and put them in buckets. So we have technical barriers, which basically Arif mentioned, the whole MMV issue. How do we make sure that the savings are measured? So that was one component. Another one was financial barrier. So people are not getting the funding that they need third was, the technical capabilities of the basically engineering in Saudi. So we took each one and tried to put together a program to address them. And today, within the center, there's basically the CMVP courses being offered, CM courses, and CA courses, all of them. On the finance side, so we came in and we said, this is the best basically setup for us. So we'll set up a company, which is, Tershid, as we know it today. And we will be actually paying for these basically projects. So, and that was the only way to get the market, to move quickly. And also on the regulatory issue, we had together a licensing scheme similar to what we have here in Dubai and Emirates generally. And in addition to that, there was a royal decree that came out mandating all government entities to retrofit their buildings and facilities. So that pushes the market to kind of move. In addition, we're creating now, to supplement this kind of work, the operation maintenance related to energy efficiency itself. So that will help broaden the market beyond retrofit to also beyond the retrofit stage and the contract. So now we know that it's good to come in and put all these measures, but what happens once you're out? I know we're talking about 10 years from now maybe, but we want to set up the foundation for operation and maintenance for energy efficiency purposes today, and we know that's going to broaden the market for all the ESCOs. And people are participating very positively, especially with the announcements of here on the tariffs and energy tariffs. That also pushed, to be honest, the adoption of energy efficiency services.
I was going to come to you on that, about how the onset of value-added tax and increasing power tariffs, slow phase in, that too, how this has really impacted the demand for energy efficiency in Saudi.
It's been, today the amount of inquiries are overwhelming from both the government and commercial sector. So we're getting, basically asked daily on what can we do, how can we save, who should we talk to? And that puts a lot of pressure for us to develop really the industry here. So now there's a handful of companies and we're looking to expand that beyond what we have today. So my understanding today is from the center itself, there's more than 50 ESCOs that have started the process. And we know that we need much, much more to kind of get the company, to get the sector basically working in a way that will help meet the demand. And as you mentioned, tariffs went up. So for the commercial sector, it was 24 halala, now it's 30 halala. The government, before it was 26, now it's 32, 23% jump. And that really adds to the top line for the ESCOs as well, right, in terms of savings. So we believe, that the GCC is becoming a very interesting, market for the ESCOs. And I think all these changes, all these structural changes happening is only going to bring ESCOs forward and help support, the demand in the industry.
Andrea, Ras Al Khaimah is home to some of the world's largest industries like ceramics, and you also have cement, really energy intense industries. How are they moving towards energy efficiency?
Well, for the industrial sector, what we need to consider is that the industrial process is typically the part of the, it's typically the part of the industry which is driving consumption. Most of the consumption is in the process itself. And with that in mind, energy efficiency for the industrial sector needs to have a much higher ownership of the industry itself, of the company itself. In a commercial retrofit, in a residential retrofit, an ESCO can come and do the job and do the retrofit, get the savings without affecting too much operations of the business. In the industrial sector, instead, this may have major implications on continuity of the business, on results, on the outcome of the business itself. So the industrial sector typically is the one who owns these processes. If you look at Dubai also, the industrial sector is the sector that responded most rapidly to the tariff changes, to the changes to the developments in energy efficiency. And that's the same that happened in Ras Al Khaimah. The industrial sector has been working on energy efficiency for a long time. And, they have applied major measures for heat recovery, for energy efficiency, for renewables, for treatment of water, reuse. The way we are planning to address the industrial sector is more with an energy management process by establishing more rigorous standards for energy management, starting from an audit and then for an implementation of best practices close to the ISO 50001. I think this is the approach that is most applicable for the industrial sector. It has been done in many other countries, in Europe, in India, in many both developed and developing markets.
And also quickly to Arif, I'd like you to talk about a couple of projects, some really big projects that are currently underway or in the tender process here in the UAE, in Dubai in particular. You have the largest rooftop solar PV project happening at Hatta, an affordable housing project. And also you're currently retrofitting for the Dubai International Airport. Can you give me an idea of the scale of both projects and also the likely savings that could be made both for consumers and also for the airport?
Sure. I think before I start with that, probably to understand how Etihad is compromised. Etihad has Etihad retrofit business, which does the retrofitting that we've just been talking about. Then there's the Etihad Solar, which is the one handling the Hatta project. So since you talked about that, there are a couple of other interesting projects probably want to talk about. But let's start with the Hatta one, which is the solar. 650 houses, an average of 3.5 to 4 kilowatt per house. That was funded by the Dubai Electricity Water Authority. The project is running right now. It's been commissioned around a month ago. And I think that was a first step to show that residential market can actually take in solar. But still, I mean, if you want to talk about solar specifically, I think it's still a bit challenging to prove the business case to the residential market on a residential house unit scale. And that's the reason if you look at the solar financing companies or solar developers, they just go after the commercial industrial customers simply because they have the roof. And also that roof allow them to address the sweet spot within a solar project, if that hasn't been discussed, which is between 500 kilowatt and 1.5 megawatt. That's where the solar developers like to play. Now, the project of Hatta happened because we're covering 650 houses at the same time. It's around 3 megawatt worth of solar, megawatt peak worth of solar panels. So that made sense because at that point, you're going in with one project, 3 or 4 developers in our case. And if you want to talk about retrofit, there are 3, maybe 4 key projects that you will be seeing in 2018. The first one is Dubai Airports. It's around 141 million dirhams. Project just signed around a month ago. The second is Wasl Properties. It's around 68, 70 million dirhams, which will happen now. I'll talk a little bit about a couple of them. There's the Dubai Golf and the mosques. We're retrofitting 650 mosques, but in tranches. If I just talk about these 4 projects, they're around 250 million dirhams worth of retrofit. There ain't enough ESCOs that can do the work right now in one shot. So we have to get the projects. There are more projects, to be honest, that we can put out there in the market than can be done. And that's the reason the way they are streaming them, the way our CEO decided to stream them is to make sure that they are there when there is capability in the market, when there is enough capacity to actually take them. It's not the issue of money. So we're just talking about Dubai Airports. I think the Dubai Airports is our gate to the world and the entry point for the world to Dubai. The airport itself takes in around 80 million travelers a year. That's 2017 numbers. Our project is to retrofit Terminal 1, 2, 3 and Concourse B. And it's done in 2 phases. The very first phase is retrofitting the air conditioning and the building envelopes. And then the second one, along with the building management systems and so on. And the second one is retrofitting the lights. And even that was divided into 2 pieces due to the mass. The first phase was divided into 2 big companies that are doing this right now. And the second one is divided to also 2 companies to do the work, just to make sure that we have enough capacity, and if there's any issue that happens, we can also always recuperate. The Wasl Properties is a retrofitting of around probably 200 buildings, which are accommodations, hotel apartments, and so on and so forth. And it's the biggest project of its kind. The very first project that we have done, which was our key to retrofit market, was at Javza. It's around 156 buildings, 256 buildings, worth 60 million dirhams. Payback time is around 4 years, 4.5 years. And then obviously the mosque and Dubai Gulf, which are okay in terms of size. But then if you look back when we started in 2015, a 15, 20 million dirham project was a big project. And now these projects are relatively small. And if you even talk to the private ESCOs, they're probably doing as big projects themselves. So that tells you that the market has actually taken off. There's enough understanding and there's enough financing from private equities and funding institutions that believe in this market. That's the key thing that we have been able to accomplish.
Thank you. I wonder if we have time to take a couple of questions. If anyone has any questions from the audience. Just some closing remarks. I'll start with you, Waled, and then I'll proceed. How do you see this year for energy efficiency in Saudi Arabia?
Well, I think it's going to be a booming year, to be honest. I know we're just in the startup phase, but we're kind of starting where others have stopped, which makes it much easier to kind of build momentum. So we have a great pipeline of projects, also quite diversified, so it caters to different companies, as I mentioned. On street lights, you know, we have these basically streetlight producers coming in and are very excited. On buildings, also we have all the ESCOs from large to small and medium sized. So we're quite excited about 2018.
Okay. Afra?
I would like just to highlight one big achievement that we have done. Sharjah, in SEWA, we are responsible for the solar street light, and we have covered the longest distance in the whole UAE, which is 50 kilometer solar LED light. And as a general of energy efficiency market in Sharjah, I think that the market will be really active because we started to call the international company. It's not only the local companies. So the competition between the ESCO will be really active, and the solution that we will come up with will be innovative. And I'm sure that within 2018, we will do a lot of projects that we will be proud of, and hopefully that we can share next year about it.
Arif?
Yeah, well, the market is looking quite promising, both on the private sector and the government sector point of view. The targets that we have for ourselves as Etihad in terms of developing the retrofit market, they're probably double what they were in 2017, and we're expecting them to grow exponentially all the way to 2030. That's the only way we can attain our energy efficiency targets of 1.7 terawatt hours and 5.7 billion gallons. I think one key area that we need to focus on in 2018 and beyond for us, as well as the commercial industrial sector, is water savings. We're still not really pushing on that part, simply because electricity has been always a low-hanging fruit, plus because of our work, it's always within a building envelope. And if you look at where the consumption of water is, a lot of it is happening on the irrigation side. So that element, we really need to work on it. We're working on it as Tecate with Dubai Municipality on irrigation, but as a retrofit, that is something that we need to tackle. Also, the second part is not just the commercial industrial, we also need to start looking at the residential market. And the only way we can really work on that is it's not just a push, it has to be a pull strategy. They need to be interested to come in. Doctor, you mentioned that in your discussion a lot. We need to show them what they get to lose if they don't do much by putting the right tools in place. We've worked on something as part of Taqati, Etihad Solar, Etihad Retrofit. We're working on a tool that will allow the residential customer to assess their potential, their savings potential within their every home. Again, that is a big market. We have around 40,000 villas in Dubai. And that part of the market that we really need to get after. Right now, we're not tapping into, but that's part of our plan in 2018.
And lastly, Andrea?
Yeah, I agree with most of the considerations that Arif made. I believe now there is significant interest from the market. We will hopefully be able also to announce important projects in this year and the coming year. What is something that I think our entities, our offices, which deal with energy efficiency, need to consider and work on is the next stage. The next stage is, for me, an extension to the private sector and ultimately to the residential. And in order to promote that, we need to work at least on a couple of aspects. One is to further professionalize the market, both from the ESCO side, but also on the client side, on the energy management side. And the second aspect is the financing mechanisms, which have been successful in other markets in Europe, incentive systems, which allowed the private sector, even the residential sector, to participate, and which is something that perhaps not this year, not the next year, but soon we will have to start considering.
Thank you very much. This has been a very insightful session. We have ambitious targets and plans underway, and hopefully we'll see them through by the targeted timelines. All the best to all of you, and thank you for joining us here.
Thank you.